We are here on a beautiful Monday with singer-songwriter, producer, composer, and chef Alex Wong. And Alex is a recent transplant from New York City, right? How long you been in Nashville now?
Yeah, more or less. 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
You came at a good time.
That's what people keep saying.
And how do you feel about it so far?
I feel great. I feel really thankful. I feel thankful to be here. I feel thankful to the community here.
Mm-hmm.
I feel still like a little kid here in terms of being a local and all that, but it's been it's a amazing place that gives you just like the space to like mentally and physically to just make stuff if that's what you
And physically too, because you
Yeah.
have space, period, right?
Yeah,
Compared
absolutely.
So were you moved from Brooklyn, right?
I did in a sort of roundabout way. I was in New York for about 10 years. I had a little studio there. And then I moved to LA for about 6 months with a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I took a tour for about 10 months. And so I put my stuff in storage. And on the tour, actually, one of the musicians on the tour is a Nashville staple, Jordan Brooke Hamlin. So if she's listening, it's her fault that I'm here.
We're glad for that.
And we would basically be in a small Sprinter talking every day about Nashville.
Oh, wow.
So she put the hard sell on me.
I was going to say she locked you in there.
Yeah, she sealed the deal in the Sprinter van. And and so I decided to check it out because I didn't really have a firm plan of after the tour. So I'm glad I did. I came here and it just felt like the right next phase.
I love the first time you're in a new city too, like that energy of everything's new and the discovery, and
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
And
And I imagine the space that you had too when you first got. I mean, you have a beautiful house over on the east side of town, and you get that studio upstairs, and you can kind of stretch your legs and have some freedom, right?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the guy from Shawshank Redemption who gets out of prison, like coming from New York, like you're like crouched in the middle of your huge living room, just being like, what do I do? All this space is scary.
There's something to be said for that, though, too. As with a studio, it's like having the restrictions. It's like, I can't have 10 mics because I don't know where to put them. I have 2, and I got to make those work.
Yeah, I felt like I got so lucky and so spoiled in New York. I actually, when I got there, I was sleeping on a friend's couch, like many people do, and I was looking on Craigslist every day we were looking for sort of practice space and living space, and this apartment. I mean, usually you have to go through these brokers in New York, which is kind of a scam.
Yeah.
And they basically hoard all of the listings, so you have to go through a broker to find anything good. But I just happened to go on Craigslist one day and see this. It was an office that was converted into a loft, and it was the only loft in a whole building. So it was just the first floor was a warehouse, and the second floor was this loft, which used to be an office. And no broker or anything. It was just like I went over and met the owner of the building and somehow got it. And I stayed there for 10 years. And I built the studio in the space. It wasn't connected to any other building, so we could play drums at 4 a.m. We could,
we had win.
Yeah, I mean, I made so many, it was the place where I did my making terrible records and learning how to do what we do. If I didn't have that space, I feel like things would be so different.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, now I'm here, and it's so nice to come here, and I don't actually feel like it's. I wouldn't say it's like the analogy I keep thinking of is, I don't know if you ever watched the show Lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you know how the island, like every single person on the island gets their own lesson from the island.
Mm-hmm.
I totally feel like that about Nashville. I feel like it's I wouldn't say it's an easy place. I wouldn't say it's like, it's not hard in the way that you're physically busting your ass at 4 jobs and like trekking all of your gear on the subway and stuff. But it's challenging in different ways for each person. I've noticed, and it kind of makes you focus in on like those. It kind of brings up all the hard questions for yourself.
Would you say? I mean, to me, that's a great analogy. I totally see that for sure. I think in my opinion, if we were to take that further, what Nashville kind of does is it takes the distractions, like the daily distractions, away, because it is an easier city to live in. You know.
That's so true. Yeah.
And then you're able to focus on yourself a little more.
Yeah. It's for better or worse. You're like, you don't have all that noise, so you're. Mm-hmm. You get to look at all of your shit.
You do. All of it, yeah.
But that's actually been an amazing thing about being here. Like, it actually has inspired me so much in a lot of ways, like musically and also life-wise. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions that you could avoid in other places. That's totally true.
And there really is, and this is something I really wanted to talk to you about, because I know it's really important to you, especially with all the different things that you do, but yeah, there really is no excuse. It's like you either get down to work or you don't, and you either succeed or you fail. And I feel like this town, I mean, I think, like, having lived in New York for almost 4 years, I loved it because it was like you're always in the seat of your pants, like, or on the edge of the seat, sorry, trying to, like, figure out how to make it work, you know. And here, it's almost like there's this pillow that sits underneath your career and your creative energy, and it's like at any time the pillow can get pulled away from you, but it exists, and it allows you the possibility of success. You know, there's people. The beautiful thing about the South, I find, is that, and people joke about the bless your heart thing, but it's like there is a niceness that exists on the front end, but on the back end, if you don't deliver, there's issues. You know, like, and it travels real quick, I find.
And you can't. You're not anonymous.
Absolutely.
You can't be a dick to somebody and then never see them again.
Yep. Or you can't get up on stage and suck. You know, like, that's the other thing too. Yeah. But if you get up on stage and you are good, and if you're kind to people, dude, word spreads quick. And I think that's
so
good.
True.
It's like it cuts they always said New York is like as musicians, we always joke, how many years does it take to succeed in a town, right? And New York, to me, we were always joking, was like a 10-year town. 10 years and you're going to be good. And I think that, like, Nashville allows you to cut that in half, because people do give you the benefit of the doubt, you know?
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, and going back to that idea of you either put the time in or you don't, and somebody else is going to pass you, you know? And the idea of discipline. And because you do so many different things, and I know discipline is such an important part of what you are and what you do, I've seen it in the studio in the few times that we've worked together where it's kind of a situation of chasing sounds, of really finding out what you're hearing and putting the time and effort into achieving that, you know. But I imagine with all the other stuff, like, what are your kind of views? I mean, as musicians, everyone that I've had so far on the podcast is like they're succeeding in their own right, and the reason they are is because they work hard at what they do. And a lot of what we do as musicians, people don't see. They just see the end product, you know. So how do you look at discipline, and what fires you up?
Oh, man. I think that's I think we have this lifelong relationship with it that changes. And I know my life.
With discipline, you're saying?
Yeah, okay. I know that in my life I've had like, you know, first part of my life, I feel like I used certain motivators that bore fruit, that, like, got results. And I'm not exactly proud of all of them, because some of them were quite negative, and some were like
preaching to the choir on that, man.
You know,
so yeah, speak it.
calling myself a piece of shit, and like, you know, beating myself up, and like and comparison and competition and a lot of stuff that does. I mean, if you are a, you know, physically able, mentally able person, you can, like, push through and, like, get stuff done under duress for a certain amount of time, I think. And you can get to a certain point. Like, there were things, you know, I think we all tend to, like, when we're in those places where we're lost and we're kind of just, like, blind and putting our hands out in front of us, figuring out how to go forward, we look back a lot and be like, well, what worked this other time when I tried to do this thing? And I would do that a lot, and I would think, okay, well, this other time I was super hard on myself, and I worked these 20-hour days in the studio, and I made myself sick, and I herniated a disc in my back, and I, like, all these things that what I thought were, you know, I think there's some conditioning there from my upbringing and from just culturalization of that's honorable. That's like a badge of honor when you're, like, killing yourself to,
I
you know,
feel you.
or if you're the busiest person out of all your peer group,
Yep.
just to, for the sake of, you know, saying that you're so busy and you're so overworked and all this stuff as a badge of honor. And that I used that for a long time. And that's, I mean, I feel like I got the first part of my career from that kind of motivation and discipline. And it's a good, like, part of it is a good skill. Like, I think, you know, being able to make yourself get up in the morning and get your shit done and work on your craft and practice and all that stuff is super valuable. But also, I think you don't have this, like, I think eventually you will burn out. You'll wear yourself out that way. And if you don't have another way to talk to yourself, then I think you hit a point where you're like, this isn't working anymore. I'm like whipping myself even harder and harder, and I'm dead, and I can't seem to produce what I used to produce. What's wrong? And so I feel like that happened to me, and I had to really like re-ask those questions and kind of like reshape that approach. And I feel like Nashville was kind of a place where I looked at a lot of that stuff and changed like what the underlying intention is, because, you know, if your underlying intention has to do so much with how you are doing comparatively with everyone else, there's only so far that can take you, I think. So yeah, it's sort of like asking that hard question, like, why are you doing this? What's the real reason?
Is it because, yeah, I mean, my version of that would be totally that too. It's like trying to be the busiest version of yourself, to feel like you're, you know, you're filling up your piggy bank, and, you know, every day you want to make sure that it's full. But the other version of that for me would be somebody telling you can't do something, you know. It's like, oh no, you can't do that. And I'm like, wait a second, you know. And that can be a version. And that was my realization of, that's not a way to live your life either. But the funniest thing about it is that the discipline that exists is something we're doing it in fields of things that we love to do, which is interesting too, right? It's not like we're going in on Wall Street and we're like working 20 hours, you know, trying to find the next stock that's going to do something. So it's interesting because, yeah, when you step back and you're like, well, I think I just really, you come to a moment where you're like, well, I really just love music, or I really love cooking, or I really love, you know, those two things. And yeah, man, that's interesting. And I would you say that it's because that the rat race doesn't exist here? Do you think that that's why, like in New York or in LA?
No, I mean, it does. It probably doesn't in terms of certain things that are so pressing. Like if you don't make rent, your heat won't go on and you'll die.
True.
Like those sorts of things are not as black and white. But there's more of a cloud of. I mean, I think it still exists. Like it's as much as you want to see. It exists as much as you choose to. So you
almost manifest the rat race yourself, and it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, and also everyone's personality is super different, and I'm like a big Enneagram junkie, and I love that because, you know, for me, it's like at some point I recognized, I was like, okay, I have a real issue with comparison, which comes from some good things. Like I am really sensitive to taking to signals from the outside. I'm really sensitive to stuff going on around me. On the converse, it's like I'm really sensitive to the flip side of that, which is comparison, and you know, just feeling this competition all the time when it may not even exist. You know, you're seeing something through that lens, and that can either, you know, make or ruin your whole day, just depending on how you choose to see that. And the other person likely has no idea that. Oh yeah, you know,
I know, man. Yeah.
Nobody cares, you know, that they're worrying about their own shit, and so.
And they're looking at you thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's been a cool and long and challenging journey, which I feel like a lot of has happened here, maybe because it has quieted down more.
You're definitely more in your own mind, for sure. Like when the nighttime comes in Nashville, it's a completely different vibe than the nighttime in New York. You know, it's definitely it's it's a town of 9 to 5 musicians, and that's why a lot of people move here, because it's so peaceful, and a lot of families, a lot of musicians that are successful in other places will come here, and when it's 5 o'clock, they go hang with their families, you know, and they shut down. But I feel you when you're still in that chase and you're still in that thing, it's like you can't shut it down. You know, 5 o'clock comes and you feel like you still want to.
That's literally lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but I love it though. I mean, it doesn't feel, you know, it's like if you find that thing that's really like, I find curiosity is a really good one to as a motivator.
if I were to define you in the small times that we've created, or you've produced whatever I came out of my instrument, I would say that curiosity is definitely the thing that I would describe you as. Absolutely. And is that kind of what the drive is for you at this point?
I try to use that as the drive. I feel like that's like on the opposite spectrum of like fear, like curiosity. Like when you're chasing something because you're curious, you're like heading towards something because it's so interesting that you can't
stop it. Yeah.
And as opposed to fear, where you're like running away from something because it's unbearable to face, or you know the alternative is so scary or something like that, or if you know you're afraid that if you stop for 1 second you're gonna not have a career, or you're gonna drown or something. And I mean,
the phone isn't gonna ring, or
and that's a endless. I mean, I've been totally in that cycle and busy, and yet just like there really wasn't any point where you can be like, oh, that felt like I've completed this. You know, there was no like completion feeling. It was just project.
Get it to the point that you're
make more,
okay with it.
You know, and that started. Yeah, that doesn't feel. That feels bad.
Yeah, but I mean, with you, do you feel like you would ever be in a place where you would be happy with something? Like, does something satisfy you?
Like is there a stopping point kind of thing?
Yeah, is there a peaceful point where I'm at peace with where this is at? I'm not chasing anything anymore. As far as
musically,
musically. Let's talk musically. Let's talk about your own stuff.
You know, 100% yes.
Okay, cool.
And I know a lot of people feel the opposite about that, and that's just I've always felt that there is like, whether it's like a platonic ideal or like some form that is like it's right. And you have, especially in producing, you know, as a producer or as an artist, I think there's something I really depend on, which is like an intuition, which is when the thing is right, whether it's the timbre of the sound you're looking for, or the part, or the mix, or the just whatever. It's like there are certain physical signals that I get that tell me that, you know, there's like I salivate, or the hair on the back of my neck stands up, or I got there's definitely like physicalities, and also there's this warm feeling or cold feeling, and you know there's times where I'll write a line and it's like sounds correct, but you sing it and you just get this cold feeling, and it's like nope, it didn't hit, and I just, that's what I chase. But when it's done, it's done. Like I really believe that there is a point where, if you can recognize it, and I think that's really the skill that I have over this whole time of being a producer and being a creator. That's really the skill that I think is the most important of the ones that I've developed or tried to develop, is that the one that tells you it's done. You know.
And it's a body thing for you. You feel it in your body.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, there are like body symptoms, but I think it's just a thing that, you know, it's just an intuition, or it's just letting yourself hear that universal voice or whatever it is that's just like, yeah, this is right, you know. And I've had so many times where there is that point, and sometimes it's really frustrating because if you're not quite there and you're exhausted and you're like, fuck, like I really want to be done, and it sounds pretty good, but you know that it's not quite there. It's really hard sometimes to keep going until you get there. But every time, 100% of the times that I've continued to put that extra effort in, I've always felt rewarded.
Really?
Always felt like I've arrived, you know. And sometimes it takes. I mean, this record I'm working on now,
Mm-hmm.
some songs that I've done. You know, there's one I did like 10 versions of, and
No,
I was
you don't do that.
yeah. And it's just like sometimes you do question yourself, and you're like, really, am I just doing like a Brian Wilson thing right now?
Yeah.
But every time though, I really feel like it hasn't let me down over the 15 years I've been doing this. So
Well, I don't think. I mean, I think you just said it. You said that you feel a peace. Like there are people that just chase things for the sake of chasing them, and I think it comes from an insecurity where they're just not sure, they're not whatever. But if you're telling me that there's a finite point where you feel it's finished, I mean, if you do 20 versions, that's as long as you feel that feeling. I mean, that's what we're all kind of chasing.
yeah,
You know?
and actually the times when I haven't been in my center, or I haven't been like, I mean, coming to Nashville is a good example where you're brand new and you're just trying to get along and like do all the things that everyone's like, you should do this and you should go to this writing camp and blah blah blah.
Chasing your tail.
And there were a lot of times where I felt like I was in a session doing some music that I didn't quite. It wasn't something that was. I didn't understand it well enough to have that compass, and so I felt like I had no idea when it was done. I had no intuition about it, and
Because you weren't even on the map, because it wasn't your thing.
it wasn't really my thing, and I was just trying to. At that point, you're trying to appease whoever else, or you're trying to you're like, is it done when that person's like says it's like smiling
Smiling at you, yeah.
and then that's just a weird. That's a really uncomfortable place for me to be, and that's part of like what I had to do here was really start to focus, almost like zone in on what I am, and like because there are so many things you can do as a writer or a producer or a music maker in general. So many avenues here that even in other cities there aren't as many. You know, there's so many like non-performing writers here. There's so many people in these niches, and if you're kind of if you don't know where your center is, it's really, I find it difficult to be good.
Yeah.
You know, like to do something special.
That's man. I'm like that's a very good way of putting it. I feel I feel like I'm in the exact same spot where you go back to where we're talking about fear, and you talk about taking things and taking work that may be a situation where you're not even on the map, or the compass isn't even showing itself, but you have to do it because you got to make sure that the bills are paid. But I think the beautiful thing that Nashville allows you to do it allows you to, like you said, to find yourself and you not worry about that so much, and find out what it is that you want to do and that you want to put your energy into. And it's so interesting. I mean, I think we have such a beautiful opportunity, and you take great advantage of it. And I want to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing with this record and with Patreon and some of that stuff, where we are so lucky in this era where we don't need to follow anyone. We can just do our own thing and brand ourselves how we want to brand ourselves. And man, it takes. I mean, I'm in my late 30s, and it's like now it's just hitting me. I wish that I could have gone back to my 20-something and said, don't just perpetuate that shitty band, club gig, because you're just going to keep doing shitty club gigs. But I think you have to figure out what it is that kind of turns you on.
Yeah, totally. You wouldn't have had that. You wouldn't be in this. You wouldn't be here saying that,
For sure.
if things were different.
Yeah, but it's a really beautiful thing to kind of sit back and just kind of figure out what it is that turns you on and gets you going.
Yeah.
So that you're not chasing, that you're not. So the discipline doesn't exist in a self-harming type of way. I think that's all kind of tied together.
Yeah.
That curiosity that you said, I love that being the opposite of fear.
And also, it's also. I mean, there's like a fine line too with. You can be really self-indulgent in this path too, and I also don't think that's. I think the sweet spot for me is like, asking those questions like what am I musically, and what do I? It's really like about like what do I have to offer to this community? Like, what is my thing that I can come to the potluck and be like, hey, here's this dish that I make. And it's different than this dish that this other guy makes, and and do it in that way, in that spirit of giving. So it's not just like, well, I just want to make this like 16-minute, jazz odyssey song, and I don't, care if it, there's time and place for that for sure. But I think that like for me,
But that's not you. That
being
wouldn't be
motivated
genuine.
by this sort of service, I guess there's an aspect of that, like where it's like, I want to give something, I want to be useful in some way, whether that means like with the record, like my solo stuff, something that is communicative, or that like I don't want it to just be like diary vomit.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Like there's a diary for that. For me, I would like it to be useful rather than just expository or something.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about that, because I've talked about that on this, with almost every single person that's sat where you're sitting, where, and it's still in an exploratory state as to how this needs to be verbalized. But as musicians, we all, and I said this with Emily last time, it was like, we all are aware of how we're perceived. Now that can either paralyze us to the point where we are so concerned how we're perceived that we create shitty stuff, or we don't create anything at all. But then we get to the point where I think when you say self-indulgent, and I'm just spitballing and talking, and I'm still trying to figure this out on my end, because I care if somebody likes what I do, and if it touches them. Everybody does that. We don't do this just for ourselves. But I think the answer to me would be, as long as you're genuine and you're doing something that you love and believe in, it's going to touch people, And even if it doesn't, that's cool. But I had a good friend, and I've told this story before, where he was on tour playing with somebody, an artist, making really great money, and he's like, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to do this on my own, and I'm going to, and he said, I got flown to Ohio to do a house show. And I had just left a stage where I was playing in front of 10,000 people, and I was flown to Ohio to do a house show for like 6 people. And I played one of my songs, and I looked out at the people, and there was this woman there, and she was crying. And he walked up to this woman, and they had this beautiful conversation about how this song touched her, and it had to do, with part of her family and stuff like that. And he said, he got to the point where it's like, I would much rather get on that plane and go to Ohio than be in front of 10,000 people. And that was his truth. That's him being genuine, and that's fine, And I think that's all we're trying to do. And I think, again, I'm just kind of talking because it's hard for musicians to say that out loud. Like, I care what people think. But we do, we care. But I think as long as we're genuine, we're going to even if it's one person, I think that's what matters. I don't know. What's your take on that? What's your take on being perceived and how that's changed over your life? Because I know it has for me.
Yeah, well, first, I like so identify with that story. I've had that story. Exact story. Beautiful. Yeah, totally. I feel like a lot of us have, we all have had these opportunities to be...
Yeah, be it like a Facebook message or an Instagram message. Yeah.
Whatever, like this whole, 20 feet from stardom vibe, where we've been lucky to be on some bigger stages in front of, like, a lot of people, which is what we're told is the thing. And so I know a lot of parts of me were like, that's what I should always aspire to.
The more people, the better. The more money, the better.
And I think it's also, it is a beautiful thing, and you do affect people even as a sideman or even as a part of a show like that, for sure. And it is a really personal decision. Like I wouldn't say that everyone. I would not say that it's more noble to be in front of 6 people at a house concert than that. It's just if that resonates, like it did. It's the exact story. The same, that was the exact same story with me, where I was touring for a long time with an artist, and it was great, and the money was great, and the shows were great, and it was even collaboratively like creative, but it wasn't my project. Yeah. And it eventually was eating me up, and it was a thing. I had to make that same personal decision to focus on something that didn't have the backing, that didn't have the fan base and all the stuff, but it was something that I just absolutely needed to do.
Where does that come
I waited till the longest. I probably waited like the absolute longest I could have waited. I probably should have done it a lot sooner, but
Well, I'm gonna flip it on you and say, man, you had to go through that to get to where you are now.
There's so much fear shit, and you're just like, you got to get rid of all that stuff, and then before you can even do it, So
what's the driving force behind that, though? Because I mean, what inside of you makes you want to do that? What is the emotion? What is the feeling? Is it longevity? What is it?
It's definitely not about like legacy or something like that. It's definitely needing to be heard as you are. I think that's really it. It's like I didn't feel, even though I wrote in that project and it was often just two of us on stage, I felt I wasn't seen the way I wanted to be seen, or the way that I just had a need to be understood. And it was more about that. It was more about just that need to be understood as who you really are. I mean, I think we all have that. Yeah. And that's the main reason why I feel like I had to do that. And even with producing, I think last year was I felt like last year was a busy year, but I was going through a lot of the same stuff where I was doing a lot of projects, and you have a lot of creativity in those projects, but they're still sort of like you're speaking your creativity through another person's vision.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I felt off. I felt like I didn't know where my center was at a certain point, and that's why I had to make a really conscious decision to not take any more projects and to like stop. And like the main reason I decided to do this record now, I'm working on a solo record, is I needed to find out where that center was musically for like me now in 2018 or whatever. What am I about musically without any other factor, without any other artist, without any other thing, and so that I can go from that point back to producing or back to whatever other project and know where that center is.
Yeah. And so you can always access it.
Yeah, and just to have that point of view, like it was a while since I had made my last record, and I just felt like I was going back to the same tool. I was going back to the same bag of tricks. I felt like I needed to know where I was now, and so
because you're not on the clock, you're sitting there in your place that again have more space and more freedom, and you can probably get that bag of tricks, like fill it up with a few more things, because you're not under the gun, I would imagine, doing somebody else's record. I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, you have that. There is a luxury to experiment. There's also you're also alone dealing with all your all your demons and everything, and
that probably makes you a better producer as seeing somebody across from you in your studio, and they're going through that and looking at you, sharing their demons, and how you can take their demons and all their positives or whatever and turn them into a piece of music.
Yeah,
to see it from that perspective.
I've always felt like I've been lucky to. I originally came from an artist, the artist place, and I think I've always felt like that was a really important part of approaching any production project was to come at it like that and talk.
To be empathetic to what their purpose is, or so you mean?
Yeah, to be empathetic to the whole experience, especially, I do a lot of probably like new agey stuff with my, like whenever I start projects, we just write. My studio is all chalkboard walls, like you've seen, and we just fill. We start by really just filling all the walls with words that have to do with anything.
Sounds
remotely.
Like therapy, dude.
That's basically what we do.
Pretty much, as a producer.
It is, sure. and it's. Just to know that just for someone to know that that what's going on, like especially during vocal session or something, just so they feel like you're not opposed to them. You're like you're in it with them, and you've been through how nerve-wracking and how scary that is to even the best singers in the world. It's not like you're not pushing those people to sing more correctly. You're pushing those people to sing to like everyone's still stripping off their layers, even if they can come in and do this insane, technically insane thing. They still have some layers there's still something there to expose. And if you don't have someone like holding your hand to get there and just leaving you out in the wilderness and being like, well, we got an hour to do this, so you better find your true self in an hour. That's not a conducive, I think, to.
Wow, and that's a fascinating perspective of you're building. It's almost, and I hate to use like a battle or a war kind of thing as a metaphor for it, but it's almost like you went through the emotional battle and together to the point where
absolutely.
they trust you when now she or he is about to pour their heart out into a microphone.
Well, I think
that
is so true, and it's like that feeling of being safe is like 100%. That's it. I mean, what I was saying with the words is like we are throwing all these words up that can be totally tangential to the intention of the record, but somehow have some relation to a feeling or a color or a mood or something. And all the sounds, so my process is every single sound has to come out of those words. It's not like we start with any preconceived instrumentation for anybody, any preconceived like band or instrumentation or sounds or my own, like I don't have a signature. I try not to have signature, tones or something like that. It's like it has to all come from those words. And if you can't say that snare sound, we're using this exact snare sound because it relates to this word, whatever it is, or even if it's, it's not even snare, it's not even a drum, it's not, that you have to be able to explain where they come from, and that holds it together to me. That holds the whole record together.
Words. So you start with words.
Yeah, I mean they're just a way to get, like, once you start seeing enough of them, you start to see patterns and you start to see certain relationships and go, oh, there are certain through lines here. There are, like, you keep coming back to this, you keep coming back to this dark forest at 7 p.m. I don't understand why. Why is that? Why do you keep saying velvet? Why do you keep saying, like, there's stuff that keeps coming up and they have a musical analogy, and that's our job is to find that. But that process, I'm there doing that with them the whole time. And then there's a lot of, like, before vocals, there's a lot of loosey-goosey. I do these, meditations and these sort of like clearings, I call them clearings, and it's just, I'm there doing them with the person so that it is a very, it's us bonding. It's us like doing this together. And then when we get the vocal, we've done it together,
Wow. That's beautiful, man. I've never heard it put that way before. That's your secret. Everybody knows your secret.
Yeah, man. All right, well, guess I should move.
Yeah, you better get that chef thing off the ground. The producer thing's gone. Dude, that is beautiful. I love that. I've never heard a producer come at it from words first, like that, and how words dictate what the music, where the music comes. That's interesting. I wanted to ask you about that, and it probably so colors is what you hear music in, right? So I mean, I'm starting to see that you're attacking music in a completely different way than, I mean, you and I are very different musically, but I attack music from a very technical side of things because that's how I was raised, and I came from a jazz idiom, and you attack it from a completely different side. And the colors thing, I would bet that as a child, you were hearing music as colors that kind of led you to a bunch of different ways of looking at things and looking at production and looking at writing.
I would say, well, actually, I was super in the classical idiom growing up, and I went to school for classical, and so I actually felt like I didn't get that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even get the fact that I might be allowed to be a creator rather than a person in an orchestra playing repertoire, because I was kind of,
that was my
path.
That's what you're saying. You didn't get. I'm confused.
Yeah, no, I grew up playing in the symphony, and I went to school for classical percussion, and I didn't. Writing, producing, those things were not on the radar.
Got it.
At
Okay,
all.
cool.
And singing wasn't on the radar at all, and being a songwriter and an artist wasn't on the radar. And a lot of the reasons I mean, some of them were, being a Chinese American, there's some sort of like cultural things that I feel like influenced the way that I viewed certain career paths, and certain things were more acceptable than other things, and also the classical. I went to a program that was pretty. I guess it was pretty traditional. Like there wasn't. I really liked it, but it wasn't very integrated with what was going on commercially or contemporarily outside of like contemporary classical stuff. And so the idea of taking the things that you learned in a class of like how you set up your multi-percussion setup functionally, and how you're searching for tones on certain instruments, and I didn't like a lot of that stuff is super influential to me now as a producer, because I do that all the time on my records, but I didn't make the connection yet then.
Yeah.
So.
But it's what shapes us to be what we are.
But sure. So you're saying about colors. I have always had that. I'm a synesthetic, and so I always had that with
you and Pharrell.
Huh?
You and Pharrell.
and lots of there's a lot of.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that have it in different ways that maybe they haven't articulated it, or someone hasn't told them that's a thing. I think we all perceive. We're not only perceiving things on one plane. I think we're all taking in a lot of information when we're listening to music, or when anyone who has a memory when they're listening to music, or sees whatever, like just gets a fuzzy feeling in their chest or something. That's
how you correlate it. Okay, that's cool. Can you explain a little bit about what it is and how you discovered that was something that existed in your being, and when it happened?
Yeah, synesthesia is just a fancy name for when your brain mixes up two unrelated senses. So for me, when I was a little kid, I would see every letter and every number and every interval like relative pitch. I don't have perfect pitch, but when there's like a tonal center, every relative pitch has a color.
Okay.
And so every letter had a distinct color. Every number, shapes had a distinct color, and I always thought that was just how it was.
Yeah.
And I would color all my stuff as a kid in those colors, but then later learned that it's like a useless superpower.
I don't know about useless.
It's good for phone numbers, actually.
Yeah, I bet.
But it's actually, I find myself getting biased sometimes by the colors in people's names. I have this like unconscious, preconscious bias. Some people's names look more pleasing than other people's. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up.
So explain to me so if you see a combination of letters or in a name, that creates a color?
No, it's all separate colors. Some people have it to a lesser degree where they see the whole word as the color of the first letter.
Got it.
Mine's is more acute, so it's like every single letter has a really distinct color, and that would be not a superpower I would want. For that case, you're totally true. It's like, man, that's a black person, right? That's not a color I understand, but maybe like a dark brown person. Yeah, like my name, I don't particularly like the colors in my name. Actually. My name is red, jade, orange, turquoise.
Wow.
So.
And it's just like that, like bam.
Yeah, it's like it's like when you see, anyone who has perfect pitch is the same way. It's like, which is also a form of synesthesia.
Okay.
Where you're not thinking, there's no thinking, it's just you see it and it's there. It's like you see anything else.
Yeah.
So
how does that correlate now to music? So when you are producing, do colors just kind of hit you as you hear different elements that pop out in a production?
Yeah, progressions.
Okay.
Totally do. When I was younger.
What's a 1 to 4?
Well, 1-4 is white to red, or to like maroonish.
Okay.
And 5 is orange. 6 is green. But when I was like my first girlfriend, I made her this mixtape of these songs that I thought the progressions were just like so beautiful, and it was like really affecting to me. And I didn't listen to lyrics at all.
Oh no!
And I gave her this.
Maybe that scarred you, which is why you're such a words guy now. Sorry.
Well, my experience of music was totally outside of lyrics for a really long time.
Yeah. It's interesting that's what. Sorry to interrupt that.
Yeah, but it was just because of that. It was like the colors of those progressions were so beautiful, and they made just like the textural, like the feelings of them, like you're touching fabric, and it's just so. It was just amazing. But she was like, "Are you trying to break up with me?" Like, what?
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, but
how did you? So I know with people with perfect pitch. It's something that you can develop. Like I have a good friend up in Canada who's a brilliant piano player, and you could take, two people and put 20 notes down on a piano, and he'll just zing them off from the bottom to the top. And it's the thing that he's developed over time. So is this something that you've developed, or has it always been at a certain level?
No, this is not. It's never gotten better or worse.
It just has always been interesting.
That's totally true with perfect pitch. Like when I'm relaxed or when I'm not. I can often pick out I can pick out A's, I can pick out whatever, and relatively everything else. But and I think it's sort of related to what we were talking about earlier with that doneness indicator. Mm-hmm. It's like when I'm comfortable and relaxed, it's like that's when you feel that. That's when I can hear those pitches, and I can tap into that intuition that's guiding me through a production. When I'm nervous, when there's like a dude A&R guy behind me, like breathing down my neck, or an artist that's like hasn't quite learned to trust you yet, and you're still trying to, there's always that period before everyone's trying to figure each other out, and that can get really noisy and hard to hear. It's harder to hear that stuff in those cases. Like if somebody's like, sing me an A right now. I'd just, I'd probably choke, but.
Well, that's interesting. So that process that you go through when you're producing somebody's record is almost as much for you as it is for them too, so that you can both feel at peace to be with each other, and you can be at peace to use what powers that you have and experiences that you have. Yeah. I mean, there's so much. I mean, we think that we're always serving the singer-songwriter or whatever that's sitting there, but it's for us too to trust that person, I would imagine, right?
Sure. I mean, everyone has to feel safe. I mean, coming back to the same thing, like I want to know that artist first, I want to feel safe that the artist has the same goals in mind, musically, artistically. I want to know that they, are turned on by the same things, like we're shooting for a similar target. Yeah. I want to know that taste-wise, we're on the same page. Like I want to be able to, at least, if we have the exact same taste, but it's like I may not agree with your taste, but I respect it. That's super important. And not like not having somebody really want the vocal to sound like this radio smash because of the reasons of like
chasing somebody.
So I think both parties have to feel safe, and getting there, I think there's always a dance that happens in the beginning, and that's like over time learning how to like make that dance shorter and like be more direct and have the confidence to trust your own process. Like I'm not the world's fastest producer by any stretch. I know that I can get to where I need to get to. But if I start worrying about like speed or, so and so is way faster on, whatever, then I'll get out of my zone and I'll do a shitty job.
Yeah. Well, what if I were to step back from the conversation, like 10, 15 minutes ago when we were talking about, you're saying you needed to be doing your thing and figuring out your thing, and the way that I was thinking, it was like, well, that's good to understand from the artist side, but it sounds to me it's almost like when you're by yourself making your stuff, you are developing that I can put 20 notes down and zing them off from bottom to top. By you're able to be in that place longer of comfort so that you can channel that when you do have an A&R person behind you or an artist behind you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's your wood shedding. It's the same thing as an instrument.
Yeah,
for sure, to be able to know that you can. I mean, like when I first started writing songs, or anyone, they sometimes you get inspired and you get this brilliant song, but you have no idea how you got it yet.
Totally.
And then you go to a session and it's total shit, and you don't know why it's total shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like over time you start to learn. Yeah, you have a bag of you have like a few rudiments, or you have like your licks, or you have your things that at least are starting points, or at least they're like they're just. Yeah, it's the same thing as your scales or something like that. And I think in production there's a similar thing. It's if every decision you're at zero, or you have no idea, or there's no guiding. And that's another reason why I use those words, is because to me that's a map to me, and I don't feel like lost at sea in a sound bank of 50,000 sounds and no direction for what is better or worse. And I don't want to rifle through all of them. I want to know that I'm going for a thing, and then know how to get to that thing. So
it's almost like having gas in the tank, and adding bells and whistles to your car, but at least you're starting with gas in the tank and figuring out what that is. It's also, thinking about another metaphor with that being at peace. It's like you think of like a sniper, and how they're able to just kind of breathe and calm themselves and take the shot or whatever in a high pressure situation. I'd imagine that would be the same development of it's interesting to me that you have to be at a certain mental state to access that feeling and that power that you've been given. I mean, I know you think that it's useless, but I think that's a beautiful thing. And it just separates you, and which is why when I listen to the things that you've produced, it's just so different, and it's beautiful. And yeah, I wonder, when I think about that, I'm just curious, just for selfish, when you listen to pop music and you listen to things like, this is me just poking and prodding at something that you've lived with all your life, but I'm super curious. Are there, when you listen to a pop radio, like, is it beautiful colors? Like, is it like if I were to look inside your brain, is it just rainbows and things dancing around, or like a 5-to-1, like a 5-to-1 progression, which is the most satisfying thing on planet Earth? Like, what colors is? I know you said 1 is white.
Yeah.
4 is red or maroon, and what's 5?
Orange.
So orange to white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's that's visually, it's like the number or the interval is that, but like when you hear it,
yeah, I'm curious. That's what I'm curious.
It really depends on a lot of things, like the voicing or the instrumentation.
Oh wow.
Like
I see.
I think there are probably things that I gravitate towards more because of the like 3D aspect of, like, if you did, like when you play, if you're doing like a progression and you're walking up like thirds or something, so different looking and feeling than if you're doing tenths, or if you've got the third and the bass. It's like it's like those. Obviously, I mean, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know who's into music, but like.
Well, you feel those things differently.
They're definitely more of a feeling, and so you start to use that in the, in the color or the texture that you're going for, depending on the words on the board. It's like, all right, well, I could voice it this way, but I could also voice it this other way, and get, a more subtle meaning of this progression or something like that. And I think that's another reason why I really try to watch out for it when I'm making an assumption and I'm not aware of it. Like with often when you work with a band or something, it's like that's the first thing that I find that in pre-production we'll do is kind of just be like, hey, let's strip all of this. I know you guys practice, every day in this configuration. And I know that, the drummer was taught that you have to keep those eighth notes going on the hi-hat, and you have to, like, but why? But why is that? What's it doing? Why is it, where else could we do that? Could we do that could the guitar player be the drummer for this song and do that rhythm there, and the drummer play a melody instead? And like, what happens to, so yeah, that's where the colors, I think, really come in and tell you what, I think a lot, like with what we worked on with especially with things like that, like horn arrangements. So different the way frequencies, I mean, you know this as a horn player, it's like you do voicing a certain way, it's so different than if you open it up and you,
for sure. Or the last thing we did where you had me on bass clarinet but like way up high. And it was a beautiful, I mean, when I heard it mixed with French horn, I was just like, man, I see what you were going for. Yeah,
because the thing on the board for that one was, it was supposed to be like a synth. We were making one sound out of the two different instruments, and so, I think.
Dude, you nailed that one. I hope that you had a poker tell like you were done.
It took a while, but it did. It did.
It was a beautiful piece.
Thank you, man.
So I believe, as far as senses are concerned, I'm just a believer in there's so much untapped potential in our brain, and 200 years from now, our senses, like, everybody might be able to see music as colors. Like, I think that I believe in that. So I'm curious, if there is a correlation to what is accepted more in music, that maybe we have that feeling in our bodies, but it's subconscious, and obviously for you it's conscious. So do you see patterns? I guess is what I'm trying to say. You mean like
with trends?
Yeah.
Music trends?
Yeah. Or is it just so esoteric that you can't quite put it all together? I mean, it's,
No, I think there's one. Yeah, definitely. I think there's definite trends. Like, I remember when there seemed to be a lot, like, I think it was like the 2000, I feel like around 2007 to 2010, I feel like I noticed a lot of songs that had this 1/6 progression. Like, just like, it was like 1/6, 1/6, and it gave it, I felt like there was this tribal feeling, and this kind of like a little bit like feral, wild, there was like a wildness to it, and I noticed it a lot, like in the different, I think it was like when, I'm trying to think of the bands that were big, but like LCD Sound System had a few songs that did that.
Was that the Lumineers era too? I guess
that was like,
I
can't remember.
What is that? 1, 3, 6, 4, I believe.
Anyway, which song? But anyway, there was like a few songs that kind of did the same thing, and I don't know, it's just one of the things.
Tribal is the way you would describe it.
That's the way that made me feel, and a little, it was a little more like, there's a little more wildness to it, and they seemed like those were more dancey, more like the songs were not these, sensitive singer-songwriter things. They were a little more expansive.
I wasn't singing Lumineers. I was singing all the kids at the Pumped Up Kicks. Who did Pumped Up Kicks?
Oh, Foster.
That Foster the People. Yeah, sorry, I was singing something different. Yeah. What about, dude? The greatest.
I know what song you're. Yeah. That was like 2, 6.
Oh, is it 2? Okay.
5, I think.
Okay.
Sorry.
Over and over and over and over.
Dorking out now.
Yeah. How about Max Martin's productions? If you were to put that all together, like, is that one color? I mean, there's a consistency.
No, I think he's
all over the map.
Yeah, not all over the map necessarily, but I think he.
And there's a consistency to it. I'm just curious if
I think he's just a master arranger.
Yeah,
like,
I agree with
everything he's doing is about arranging to me. Like, and you can, I feel like I can tell sometimes when lyrics, you're like, really? Does that make sense? Like, that's not quite, but the sound of it is right on. Like the syllables and the diction and like the sounds. He's just making music with lyrics. Like, that's, I think, where he's coming from with it, more so than like a folk singer-songwriter,
I've seen a couple of his sessions, and I've looked at soloed some things. And a friend of mine actually, who's coming on Wednesday, he used to work for Jive and did some stuff with Max. And I had a chance to isolate some of his parts, and they sound like crap isolated. Like there's like you'll go through them and you'll hear this guitar part, and you're like, it's just a terrible guitar loop. But then when you take it out of the mix, it doesn't sound like the same track. You put it in, and you're like, oh, this makes sense.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how he's able to construct this painting of, you know. But it's interesting that you're hearing it from lyrics first.
Well, I mean, I'm hearing his take. I'm only assuming because I've never talked to the guy, but
It'll be a fun conversation for sure.
But man,
if you can find him.
He's taking you on he's never leaving you, and that's another thing with the good production. Like you feel safe when you're listening to it. You're never left out in the cold. Like
there's
anytime
there's
there's never like a big empty field, or if there is, there's a really good reason for it, you know. And he's taking you. He is completely in control of your ride. Yeah, that's interesting. Which is really the great thing to aspire. I feel like I'm always trying to aspire to the same thing. Like I want to direct the person, the listener. I want them to feel safe, but I also want them to feel danger, and like you get to control where that stuff happens, and you know all of that psychological stuff about what our brains do when we hear repetitive patterns, and when we hear like a variation, or if we hear this pattern too long, you know, that's all the stuff that makes somebody super talented, is they know I can play this pattern just this long, and now I got to change it here, and when I change it here, it's magic, and when I wait another 2 beats to change it, it's stupid. You know, and like that, I think he's so clued into that that he's really like able to manipulate us so much.
I love that you say that he lets us take the ride, and I love that for you when you're saying like I like to make it a little dangerous at times. I love that you've defined that. That's beautiful.
Like in song where you know, in Nashville, it's an unpopular thing to say, but like, you know, there might be a time where you want to almost punish it's like the listener, where or like you're stretching something out, a section, really like for a really long time, because of what the experience is of hearing that. And like something, the song you played on, actually, there's like a really long, like it's totally a lopsided song that will never be on the radio ever, because it's like 6 minutes long, and but I really love having a section that just grows that slowly, and that kind of like, and by the end you're like, oh, like I get it, like now that I like there's a context to it.
There's a buy-in. There's a buy-in by the
listener. You have to invest there, and if you let someone down after that investment, it's a shitty. It sucks. Nobody wants to have invested that time and then have no payoff, or have you know. So
that is fascinating, because with Max Martin, it's like, you're not investing. You're like, you might have paid your $2 admission to hop on a roller coaster, but you're going to have the time of your life, and when you're done, you're going to want to get back on it. You know, there is really, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And to me, I've always thought of it as tension and release, and how long you build that tension, and when you release it.
Totally.
And I love the idea that when you release it, if it's not a good payoff, you've let them down. That's fascinating, dude. I love that, man. I've never looked at production quite like that before. That's beautiful.
You know how, like, I mean, EDM, everyone's like making fun of the drop now, of course, right? You know, and the reason is because now it's not surprising anymore. It's not exciting, but now people in EDM change it. Like all the drops, you can't do that typical cliche one anymore. You have to excite someone. You know, you have an audience of people who only listen to EDM. They've heard every drop there is, or you know, and they want to be excited. They want to be surprised and scared. And so you have to push that. And sometimes I feel like that's, if there's one thing that I think sometimes people get, they could push further. I mean, it's probably a lot of things, but like with the sort of, like there's always those people on the edge of pop, you know, talking about Max Martin, like the people who are like really pushing the genre and pushing the sounds and pushing the arrangements, and you know, like the post hook. It's like that's a good example of like a new
that's
trend.
Crazy,
that came from EDM music and now is in pop music and now is in country music, and like it's exciting to.
Where does it go from there? Is that where it kind of dies?
everything. And then,
Everything dies at country.
it's like country music. I'm not gonna like it's
Kids music, children's music.
I'll
That's
just say
what it is.
that production wise, it always seems like it's like hip hop 10 years ago or something.
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like when you listen to something like a pop country song, it always, to me, it works, but it also sounds a little polite. Like it sounds like stuff. If you're a big pop listener or beyond, you're like, oh, okay, they've been doing that for a while.
It's like the
They've been
Ferris
doing-
wheel. It's not the roller coaster. It's still a ride, but it's not quite as
It's a little
exciting.
safer.
Yeah.
It's a little, and there's, I mean, but the reason, and I'm not like saying that to bag on country, because I think where the excitement is more focused in the lyrical,
Of course, yeah.
Stuff, and like, in pop country, there's a little bit more, the focus is, sometimes they need more of a predictable bed there, so that
their message can
that
be
the
heard.
lyric, the phrasing, the turns of phrase and stuff can be a little bit more, that pop out a little bit more. I just, yeah, like a pet peeve of mine is like, in certain genres where they focus so much on one thing, like lyric, that they just accept every single song is like the same picking pattern, the same tempo, the same progression. But yeah, the lyrics are great, but it's like I might as well be reading poetry, you know?
Pretty much, yeah.
I think it's cool when people can combine all those tools and excite you in all the ways, all the senses.
But do you think there's a risk of overstimulation as far as that's concerned, though? Because you can't. I think your brain can only discover one thing at a time, right?
I heard your brain holds 3 things at a time. A friend of mine just told we were talking about this. So this wasn't my idea, but someone told me this concept, and I think I'd heard it before. But and it's also the same in design and visual theory as well. That there's sort of like, you have these 3 elements that you can focus on at one time. One is going to be sort of like your sort of foreground information. One's going to be sort of the accompanying information. One is going to be the background setting information, I guess. And then beyond that, it gets difficult to understand the other elements. So I just think about that a lot when I'm arranging or mixing. It's like, where am I trying to direct somebody at this moment?
So is your maximum 3?
It may not be, but maybe several sounds might go into the texture.
Okay.
Might make
Of one,
a bed, or might make an arpeggio texture or something, and that's sort of like an element in itself, But I want to know where I'm trying to throw someone's attention at all times.
So their main attention is what you're saying. Like, are you always conscious of which one is happening, going to which part of each brain at the time when you're mixing or when you're producing?
I'm trying to be. I mean, I'm probably not nailing it all the time, but
Yeah.
I think I try to aspire to at least be like, okay, this is where I would want to have their focus here, and then I want to divert it here, or I want this other element to start to complement this. Maybe it's the vocal, but maybe it's not the vocal, and maybe this complementary line is changing the color of the vocal or something, or this melody. But I just want to be aware of it.
How do you look at a song from beginning to end? Do you look at it as though it's a story? What would you look at it as? Obviously we've talked about taking people on a journey.
I think the ride is a
ride.
good analogy for me. A story in terms of, like, I think of it as a movie, maybe more. I think that's actually, to me,
Do you think of an album as a movie or a song as a movie?
I think of a song as a movie, and then also an album as maybe the series. I don't know,
Yeah.
but as the experience of listening to a song, I want there to be a drama. I want there to be an arc. I want there to be, a certain type of drama dynamic and I want to be in control of that. So, that kind of determines all the other choices as far as, like, are we starting small? Are we starting huge? Are we starting with a surprise? Are we starting creeping in? where do we go? Are we, where are we coming down? Where are we depriving them of something? Where are we giving them the payoff? And it's the same as watching a movie, just feel that satisfying feeling when it's like the arc was so perfectly, crafted that you just enjoyed it, and you were totally riveted the whole time. And there was no point at which you started checking your phone, or your mind started wandering, or there was so much coming at you that you just got lost and you shut down, like your brain just shut off, And I think you're always walking that line. And that's the thing about feeling safe with a good songwriter or good producer or something, where it's like, that they're going to take you on the ride that you want to go on, even if you don't even know that you want to go on that ride yet. They're like, no, this is what you want.
I mean, we consume music in so many different ways. It could be somebody saying, hey, check this track out, or you could be walking around somewhere and hear something, and you're not ready to take the ride, but if you can draw them in.
Like Timberland, one of my favorite producers, but when he put out Sexy Back, I fucking hated that song when it came out. And I was like, what is this? And then after a while, I was like, oh, I like it. Oh man, I really like this. And it's like he was like 2 moves ahead of me. And he's kind of always been like that. He's always, challenged people enough, but also given them enough to sink their teeth into. And so,
wow, that would be a good way of describing him. Yeah, absolutely. That whole record. Oof.
Yeah, man. And those are the guys, like, I think my biggest influences, I don't make hip-hop music, but in what I do are those guys. It's like Pharrell, him, Danger Mouse. I think that's where the exciting stuff is going on. And to translate that into, this other world of instrumentation and storytelling.
Would you say that, I mean, you've obviously been nominated as a producer for a Grammy, and you've had great success, and you've created beautiful records. Do you associate...
I should fact check that it was a Latin Grammy.
Well, that's the same thing.
And I was nominated as an engineer.
Oh, there you go.
But I did produce.
Yeah. So I mean, do you correlate, obviously, the success that you've had and the records that you've had that have been successful? Is there a common thread between them? Obviously, there are many different artists and different genres and stuff like that. Do you, when you talk about being finished, when you talk about, that you can't, when you have a moment as a musician where something falls into your lap out of the sky and you finish it and you go, oh, that's special. Is there a correlation with your production where you just knew that some of these things were going to be, or is it unpredictable? Like you just do the best you can.
That's a hit, and then it became a hit kind of thing?
Yeah.
I've never had a hit, so I don't know, but things that I think totally. I don't think I've ever been like, that is a piece of shit, and then it became massive or something.
Well, there's different levels of positivity that you throw towards a piece. I mean, there's an undeniable thing where you're just like, oh wow, that's special.
I think more often than not, when I've waited for that signal, and I feel really good about it, it's at least resonated. Okay. Somewhere.
It has a better chance.
It's just, it feels authentic, and if it feels authentic to me, I think it's usually resonates more with someone else. I'm trying to think of the stuff that like has had external, success in terms of like.
I mean, for me, Elizabeth and the Catapult stuff, or the Elizabeth stuff you've done, is some of my favorites for sure. She's just kind of a magic genius wizard, so kind of hard to go wrong. I mean, all you can do is fuck it up, I guess. Yeah, that's true. So. She is pretty magical, for sure.
But that track that we did, I felt really, I felt like that was we had hit something that felt special, and some of the other records, like stuff that's gotten in, syncs or something. I think there's always, something I'd be like, I could see why maybe that works. Yeah.
So now you're working hard, I mean, you're working on people's records, but you're obviously working on your own stuff. Are there any? I mean, if you were to say like one or two things that you've taken from the time that you've put into the time by yourself working on your own stuff that you would take into production now, is there anything in your consciousness that you could say, I'm going to bring that to the next situation?
Yeah, that was a good question. You have really good questions, and you're not even reading anything. I'm so impressed. Yeah, I definitely feel like this was a really important time for me. It was at times felt really torturous and scary, but I feel like I feel expanded. I feel like
Give me some things about the expansion that, like, give me some details.
Well,
about that.
man, I think when you're busy, you probably can relate that you are operating on maybe 80%. Like, and when you're really busy, you don't have the time to go and like do all this experimentation or learn this new piece of software or get really into your synth or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
You're kind of going and you're doing the best you can with the tools that you know that you feel comfortable with and are at your fingertips and stuff. But to do the stuff that's like beyond your, you know, that's pushing you past your pay grade, kind of, so to speak, it's hard to do that with a client who's paying you. You know. You know, so I feel lucky that there are artists that love to go on that journey with me, and we'll sit there and we'll just experiment, and it's, you know, it's great. And I've taken a lot of stuff from those records and put them into my toolkit.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that you don't get a chance to do, and there's always like a running list on my phone of stuff that I'm like, when I have the time, I really want to experiment with this or this. And so that's the stuff that's been really great is
You're filling up your toolbox.
Get new tools and sharpen tools and stuff like that. And also taste-wise, I think that's another thing. It's like sometimes you don't even have the time necessarily to question your taste, that intuition part, and just be like, what if I really pushed myself to do this kind of song that I traditionally hated, or this, or come at it from this angle that seems really scary to me. Like a song I was working on today is so unabashedly optimistic, and it's making me really uncomfortable because I'm not used to expressing that side of me, but it is a side that is there, and I really wanted to. It's almost like I need to be more brave to do that than to do this sort of, you know, other thing that I'm more comfortable with, like questioning, you know. So that's stuff that you don't have time to do, and that's stuff that I think I'll bring back to other records.
So
for sure.
The tangible is your toolbox is, you know, this synth could work on this. I have that in my bag and I can use that. The intangible is the fact that you're getting more, you know, you're broadening your genres and you're experimenting with different emotions. Is there something that intangibles being like approaching a client? Would you approach a client differently now, having gone through the process that you're going through, or do you feel like you're kind of on par or on point with what you've been doing?
I've actually felt like it was a good test for me, because I think in that sense I've learned a lot over doing lots of records about how you relate to the artist and how you psychologically, you know, approach each different person. And I actually feel like more so than that, I've taken those lessons and I applied them to myself, where I almost had to separate myself into two people, the artist and the producer. And so a lot of the things that I have learned about dealing with super neurotic artists or people going through insecurities,
I was going to say insecurities is big. Yeah.
I had to turn around and use those same tools on myself in a big way.
That's a lot.
And separate that noise, so that the like monster voice that's, you know, yelling in my ear about how much I suck, I can turn on producer guy and be like, okay, you don't suck.
Yeah.
This is, you know, and be a little bit more pragmatic about some of the decisions, and it helped get through some places where I might have just given up or like burnt out.
Or
Otherwise,
you built new neuron paths in your brain to allow yourself to access. That's beautiful, because I'm sure that insecurity thing exists in all of us, and it's interesting when you're looking at someone else's insecurities and not your own.
you're so much more, you're so much more sympathetic and understanding. And yeah, like times where an artist is like totally, wrecked after half an hour of vocals or something, like emotionally.
Yeah.
What do I do when I'm a producer? Do I yell at them? No.
Yeah.
We go to lunch. We take a walk. We go play with my dog. Whatever. Like, and so that's
Which is the most
stuff.
amazing dog ever, by the way. I love your dog. Sorry.
I will. I'll let her know.
Pass that along. Yeah.
She'll probably listen to this later. But that's the stuff that like I would never do to myself. I would just sit there and beat myself up, you know? And so it's like stopping and being like, let's go to lunch.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing.
You deserve a treat. Let's go get you a treat, like those things were huge parts of this process that were never part of my process before.
Wow.
That
So this you're your production is highly developed, and then your artist thing is developed to a certain place where you've kind of put it aside and you're kind of bringing it back. And it's amazing to me to think that this side of you, that's the highly developed producer side, is now developing this other side. Like did that happen right away, or did it take a while for you to go, why am I singing for 2 hours when I'm not getting anything that's good? Like what did you have, like a magical moment, or is this something that you approached from the beginning?
So when I did my last record, I put it out in 2012, and at that time I was in New York, and things were very secure in terms of my own opinion of, I guess, where I was in my career, and I just felt like it was in my comfort zone. There weren't a lot of surprises at the time. Like I felt like I had a good place in the community. I was working on stuff I liked. And I felt very secure and safe, and so when I put that record out, I was in a really different mental place than so right after that is when I moved, and everything kind of got tossed around. And when I moved to Nashville, like when everybody comes here, it's like you have to start over in some sense. Mm-hmm. You may have accolades elsewhere, but they kind of don't count in some ways here. Like people need to see for themselves, and you got to prove yourself again. Yeah. And so there was a lot of insecurities that I had to work through coming here to get back to that place. And so
were you getting back to that place, or were you going past that place?
Yeah, hopefully past it, because looking back, it's like, there was a lot of blind spots. There was a lot of stuff that I wasn't seeing that clearly at the time, but feeling wise, I felt like I was the shit, and like whatever. But as that's all comes crashing down, you realize, oh, okay, I was not the shit, and I had these big holes in my skill set here, and I had to, and I came to Nashville and like, oh, well, there's 20 people who do really similar thing to what I thought I did,
yeah, of course.
And they're really good at it, and so it was harder. It became harder to. I had to build that confidence back up. And I felt like I built it back up as a producer, but not as an artist yet. And so that's kind of why it took me so long to say I am worthy to take myself as the focus and do this record, because I was still in that mentality like I didn't deserve it yet or something. Yeah. So that was one of the things that, like, talking to myself as a kind producer, I think I had to start doing that before I started this project.
I was just gonna say, do you have conversations with yourself?
I do. I totally do. But I had to like psych myself up for it in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of these kinds of conversations with myself leading up to starting it and to the point of diving into it.
Huh. So, dude, let's talk about the record, man. I know you're doing this really cool thing that we've talked a little bit about, but if there's anybody listening out there that's an artist too, it's definitely at your fingertips, and all this beautiful stuff that exists at our fingertips now. But there's this incredible site called Patreon, and basically maybe explain what that is just quickly and how you've utilized it in your career.
Yeah, Patreon is sort of a blank slate platform where people can. It's like a subscription service
For anything,
for
even
anything.
podcasts, people do it too, right? Videos and whatever.
All it is a platform, and what you put on it is totally up to the user. So I am mostly doing music and videos, but there are people doing, podcasts, people doing instructional courses, photography, comics, theater stuff, YouTube videos. So it's a pretty wide open. It's basically for any creator. So.
Yeah. So you're creating different content. So as far as branding is concerned and stuff like that, what obviously the things that you have at your fingertips are a beautiful studio and the ability to create beautiful tracks. But some of the stuff that I love that you're doing is you're incorporating people into your production, and you'll show yourself getting different sounds. You'll show yourself in the process of the video and how things are being made. Do you enjoy doing that stuff? I know we have to do that these days. Is that something that you enjoy doing?
I do. I totally do.
You like involving people in the process?
I do, because I think I'm best. That feels as the most natural to me, versus being like really funny, making really funny YouTube videos or something, like, or being really like out there and like, that's something that feels natural to my personality versus trying to do what some other person is doing, which is natural to their personality, but would come off stupid if I tried to do it. So I think with the social media stuff, it's like finding what feels authentic is super important to me, and it's helped me like be able to post without feeling like a jackass, and to be able to like express myself there in a way that feels right rather than feeling gross.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, being that genuine thing. I mean, I had that conversation with so many people. It's such an important part of what we do, and it's. I think that's the future of it. It's just as long as you're doing something that you believe in, just like the songwriting. It's like it'll be received on the other end in a beautiful way.
I mean, we don't all have to be hams or be like.
I mean, even if people are that, then that's cool.
Yeah, or make sexy selfie pictures or something like. But if that's what if that's natural to you, then that's great. But yeah, so I mean, with the Patreon thing, it's a lot of people say it's like a Kickstarter or like a pledge thing, in terms of you are crowdfunding. So all of your fans or supporters sign up for any amount, like $1, and it's like a regular, like a monthly subscription, or it's every time I put up a song, they get charged $1 or $5 or whatever they want. So it's a little bit like a Kickstarter pledge in the way that it's crowdfunded, but it's ongoing rather than shooting for one big chunk of capital. Yeah,
I love that, and I think that people that don't know kind of what goes into even creating one song. I mean, I don't know. I could ask you about numbers, but as far as some of the incredible budgets that you've had for major labels, I was just talking with a friend the other day. I had an artist who was on a major label. We cut some horns at the house here. I won't say his name because I'm going to say numbers, but his first record, there was an $80,000 budget for just strings on the whole record. And it's like, that just doesn't exist anymore. And like, they used to spend $500,000 on records in the 90s and the early 2000s, And what it takes that you've built as far as your gear and, what it takes to get the sounds, I think people need to know that people like yourself need to be supported, and even for $1 or $2 to go towards that, and to know that you have people that are waiting for it, and that you're going to be able to pay for like a bass clarinet player to come in, or a French horn player to come in, or all that kind of stuff. I think that puts an ease on our minds as musicians to be like, well, you know what, somebody's going to want this on the other end, and also I feel like it's contributing to the community.
Yeah, I think the community aspect of it is awesome. I think that just knowing, like you said, like that's maybe the biggest part of it for me that's been has been a benefit is knowing, is like you have this community that's your community, and it might not be massive. It's probably not massive. Mine is not massive, but they're there, and it's not just my family, and it's like people who, care enough to have put down their credit card and say, I want to hear what this person has to say. I'm going to put $1 or $5 or $10 towards that. And that is huge. Like, mentally and just spiritually has been one of the biggest things that's kept me going with this record, is just knowing that when you post something, you're not just posting it into the abyss of the internet. You're posting it to people who actually give a shit and want to hear it, and they're going to receive it, and it's going to get listened to. And even if it's, 10 people or 20 people or something, just having that audience, and some people will comment, or just knowing that they're there, and there's some investment versus no investment of on any social media platform, has really motivated me and kept me inspired to make stuff that I think is as good as I can make.
And it keeps you somewhat accountable, I would imagine, too.
And it keeps you accountable, and yeah, exactly. You don't want to like flake and not give them anything for that month. I think it's been an amazing thing for me, and it's not for everyone in terms of, it's not glamorous. It's a very working man's approach to creating your art, which for me works really well. For other people might not work as well. I think it helps that I can create a product from top to bottom without too much outside help, because that means that all I'm investing is time, versus like having to pay thousands of dollars every time I want to post a song, which I get, people are subscribing to for $1. So that is big. But
have you ever read the book? I haven't read it yet, and I'm hoping you have, because I want to read it, and it's in my list of things to read. But the idea that 1,000 true fans. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Have you read that?
I've not read it, but I've heard something on NPR or something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such an attainable number for us.
Yeah, and it's totally true. I think it's completely true.
Yeah.
And I think that having toured, doing the indie touring thing and doing the Patreon thing, you totally see it. Like, you don't need world domination to make your rent. But it does take. But you're not it's not as much of an ego stroke either. It's not, so you got to be kind of a lifer. You kind of got to be in it because you have to be.
Yeah, it's the long game for sure.
And if you have to, then you can make it. You can turn those 1,000 true fans into something.
I think it's coming to the conclusion that we talked about, like, almost at the very beginning of this, which is, you have to come to the point in your life, in your career, where you don't want to be in front of 10,000 people. You want to be in front of 6 people and one person that you can reach, and that makes it that you've done something that is special to them. If you're at that place in your career, then you're in it for the long game.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's that you don't have to not want to be in front of 10,000 people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But man, like, I have a Post-it note on my phone that I kept for a few years, where every time a fan or someone on the internet or something writes something personally to me and says, hey, this song affected me this way, or what, I copy and paste it and I put it in this Post-it note, because we need that shit. We never get it. We never get the you're doing the right thing, or and just having the ability to look back and be like, that one person at this time was really affected by this experience or this song or something, and it helped that person. Like, that keeps me going for sure, and I would rather, and that's really important to me. So
how do people find your Patreon? Let's talk about how they check you out and get more information.
Well, you just go to Patreon with an E, patreon.com/Alex Wong Sounds, and all
And that's
the
your
stuff is
Instagram
there.
handle too, right? Alex?
Yeah, Alex Wong Sounds is sort of my handle across the board.
And is it High Ceiling that they go to get your stuff? Or does
Like my website?
Website, yeah.
It's alexwongsounds.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know when I was doing some Googling, I found the High Ceiling. Is that the production company that you work on?
Yeah, it's because I'm like the worst brander in the world, and I couldn't find an Alex Wong handle that no one had for the longest time. I don't know why I didn't think of Alex Wong Sounds before, but so I basically my production company is called High Ceilings Music, and so I had that for part of my stuff, and then I had Alex Wong Music for part of it, and it just was like a total mess. So now everything is Alex Wong Sounds.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
If there's people, I mean, a lot of the beautiful things that came out of this in this conversation is some of the production techniques and some of the things that you do. Are you sharing any of that kind of stuff on your Patreon at all?
Yeah, a lot of it, and actually some of the rewards have to do with people who want to get more in depth with production stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I like to post these videos of just little things from the studio, or how we.
Well, that's definitely
the
one
process.
of your superpowers for sure. I love that. That's a highly developed. I mean, some of the stuff that we talked about, I've never thought of it that way. You know, it's beautiful.
Thanks.
So
man.
I'm glad that
Appreciate
people
it.
can access that. And are you able to? Do you do like Q&As and stuff like that on there at all, or like?
Yeah, there's some some of the reward levels are things like that, like cool. Chats and that stuff. But also I post stuff on my, not to not sell you on the Patreon thing, but I also do that on just Instagram and I just love talking about that stuff. I don't think I was really inspired by Pensado's Place, that
I don't know.
podcast.
I haven't checked that out.
It's kind of dorky, but it's Dave Pensado. He's a famous mix engineer.
Okay.
And he started just interviewing his buddies, all these Grammy-winning mixers and producers, and expanded out to songwriters and artists and stuff. And it got huge. This thing. Now they have the Pensado Awards. Oh, cool. And they have it's a pretty big thing, and but everyone goes on there and they really go pretty deep into their own tricks and their own things, and his philosophy seems like it's very much we're not taking anything away. I'm not endangering my career by sharing
secrets,
this stuff, because no one's going to do it the same way as this other person.
Ooh, there's a huge myth in the industry that exists. Oh my goodness.
I mean,
every element of it.
That's killed me for so long. This whole scarcity thing, and
it's fear. It's fear of losing what you already have.
But it's not even true. It's it's not even it's not even reality. It's we've seen this thing as this. I have this finite resource of ideas, or this, and that's bullshit. That's completely.
Totally.
If I ever felt like I had a finite source of ideas, I would just quit, because.
And that's an insecurity thing. You just have to stand on the fact that this is who I am, this is what I'm good at, this is what I believe in, and if you want to take it, you can go to try. But
yeah,
this is
you
where
might
I
come up
stand,
with something else awesome. I've taken other people's ideas, translated it through my brain, and it's ended up something else.
Yeah,
and
totally.
we have to do that.
Yeah.
And the goal being everyone making great stuff.
Yeah, as long as they're coming, as long as they build their toolbox, and then they just, then they take their tools and they dig into their soul and they find what matters to them, and what their soul is different than what your soul is. They might have the same tools, but they might say it differently.
You can see. I mean, it's sort of scary these days, where literally everyone has the same sound libraries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's kind of like everyone's just rearranging the same ingredients at Taco Bell,
Yeah.
But
totally
but
true.
still coming out, people are still able to express their own personality through the same sounds.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. You have the same plugins, but what goes into that? How are you putting things together?
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Well, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it, and that's some production stuff that's just I'll never forget.
Man, my pleasure. Thanks.
We'll have to talk
so much for. You got to do one on yourself, Tyler, because you are an interesting human.
Well, I appreciate that. I like to talk to other interesting humans so I can become a better and more interesting human myself. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you.
Watch this heavy heart of mine turn this this water into wine. Light your match and let it glow, so I know my way home. One more game of tic-tac-toe. You be X and I'll be you. Fall in love like dominoes, then I'll come back home. If I can't find you, go get lost in the simple things. Might I remind you, chase your tail and dream those dreams. One more glass to set me free. Forget right past what's in front of me. I'll be fine, they tell me so, 'cause I know my way